G'day all, it's Glenn from Fat Glenn's Fish. I'm finally back online. I've had a quiet couple of months, as you know. I'm going to explain why in the following video. I've had some major works going on in my fish room as a result of a failing in a design that I implemented some years ago when building timber racking. It's been a big setback, but it's been resolved, and I'm going to show you a quick overview of what has been going on at my place. See you soon. So I want to start this video off with a lot of positive, and it's a positive result in the end, by the way, but one of the good things that came from this disaster on the back wall is that I have purchased extra lighting. We're seeing the benefit of that in my grow out section here. The bottom two rows here have now been fully lit with the LED style lighting that I have used and am moving over to throughout the room, as well as the top row of grow outs up here are now have their own LED lighting. The only fluoro I've got left in the room now is that top row on the right, and I can't wait for that to go. That's the next purchase, is to get this rack on the right hand side lit properly. We'll get that sorted over the next few months, so that hopefully all my filming from here on in will be a lot nicer. The new rack is fully operational as of the last week or so. Front hoses back in place, so they haven't moved, and they're now standing on timber which is not rotting and sagging at a horrendous rate of knots. I don't know whether you guys ever got around to watching the video I made on fixing a leaky tank, which was this one dead in front here. I reckon I'd had leaks for a long time. The amount of damage that I found in the timber in this part of the racking in particular was pretty horrendous, and unfortunately a lot of it was out of sight and out of mind back underneath, down the bottom there, where you don't go unless you drop your keys. Anyway, lesson learnt. We've done a complete rebuild, and that's included all new timbers, all new lighting on this side. We've transplanted the old lighting around the corner, as I just mentioned, and I'm all but finished putting fish back in. Still got to do some decoration, and I'm sort of toying with the idea of running some of these colonies without much decoration, just to experiment with reducing aggression by not introducing territory. Case in point, the Cyaneus down the bottom here. But I'm so pleased with the way it's come up. It looks a treat. I've still got to fix a couple of little nicks and scrapes on the paint on the black timber, where I've had to do a bit of work to get the timber into the shed physically. But to have 12 4-foot tanks back and available for the next phase, as I really try and prepare myself for a solid year in 2022, to get some breeding going and really reinvent myself. The top row no longer has the cube tanks that I used to use for little projects like shell dwellers and Julies and pairs of fish. There, I'm in the process of having some tanks made by a contact that's going to produce me a couple of 6-footers to go up here. I've got 4.8 metres of available shelf now, so we're going to go a couple of 1.8s, the 6-footers, and that leaves room for maybe another 1.2 metre 4B18, sort of like these ones up here. So I'm going to get 3 more big tanks along the top here sometime in the new year. I'm loving the fact that my floor is no longer constantly moist and, you know, building up algae and crud. I suspect that a number of these tanks were probably giving me a very slow leak over a long period of time, and I possibly had a leak that I found in my my drainage system, my plumbing, which was contributing to a slow drip onto the floor as well. So I now have the luxury of a bit of carpet, which stays relatively dry, so that at the end of a long day I can come out with a coffee or a beer or whatever takes the fancy, and I can lie down on the floor and actually watch my fish in comfort. So yeah, well pleased with the result. It's come at a good time because I was struggling a bit towards the end of this year with just COVID fatigue and the shit that we're all going through in the world. Looking good. Even got my brine shrimp going again. It's triggered a lot of positives for me. Gradually pulling out that old fluoro stuff up there. I'm going to clean my roof for the first time in 4 years, get the dank off, and just create a much more positive environment for me to enjoy my fish again. So with enough of that positive spin, we'll show you some of the horror video of what I encountered when I pulled this all apart. Pretty gross.
So here we have the rubble left from the deconstruction of the racking. It's pretty amazing how terribly degraded this timber was. This is a piece of the rail that was running along the bottom of the back of the bottom row of shelving, so right back in underneath where you don't see unless you go looking. I sort of was aware that there was issues with the rack for some time, in that the height was certainly dropping, and I knew that the legs on the tank were starting to conduct water upwards, and it was starting to happen pretty dramatically. You can see how much this wood is composted down almost. Luckily the front rail remained pretty solid, so that the tanks themselves tended to just drop and roll back against the back wall, so it didn't look overly menacing until you investigated further. And when I investigated further, it was obvious that something had to happen ASAP.
So right now the walk to my fish room is a pretty depressing one, because all I see on the way is how much I've got in front of me still. I'm around 3 weeks into this project of rebuilding this rack in the back of my shed, and unfortunately, of course, it's the biggest rack, and what that has required me to do is, over the course of that time, remove 12 4-foot or all but 4-foot breeding tanks and all the fish, substrate, filters, whatnot that goes with. And I'm going to take the opportunity while I'm doing this work to completely freshen everything up. So you can see I'm starting to scrape off the old black paint. These tanks went in back in 2008-9ish, and there's obviously all sorts of crusty nasty on the back of these tanks. And now that I'm trying to make a bit of a go of this YouTubing, it's probably going to make for better footage moving forward, if they're all freshened up and we're not looking at parts of the wall throughout videos where the black paint has kind of gone by the by. Over here we've got 10 cube tanks that have come out. These used to be on the top back row and used to be used for little projects like pairs of shell dwellers or colonies. The potential is there to breed a pair of discus in these if need be. They're 100 litres, but I'm finding as times are changing that I wish I had a few more big tanks, so I'm going to take the opportunity to, now that I'm doing this rebuild, I'm getting a couple of big tanks made by a good bud who's going to get me sorted out with a couple of nice six foot tanks, which will still be for projects, but probably targeting, you know, bigger Malawi hap species or possibly some frontoses. I'll make a decision on that a bit closer to the time, but big tanks are always at a premium and it'll be nice to have a few more. A lot of my sand sitting there in buckets. We've got the paint tray on the go. We really are halfway through this job. There's 300 odd bucks worth of plumbing. I'm taking the opportunity to do a sort of an upgrade on plumbing that will make it much more viable in the future. That I'll reduce my wastage by reusing a lot of the expensive part of the plumbing. So by using some of these threaded fittings, these ball valves here are threaded so that I'm not gluing them in, they'll be screwed in, and that just allows that if in 5 years time I pull up stumps and don't do this anymore, well, that stuff I can basically sell off at some sort of a recovery, whereas once it's all glued together it's pretty much done and dusted to be reused in any capacity. And you know, the most of the expenses in that ball valve and the rainwater tank outlet, so I'm going to future-proof a little bit by upgrading that. We'll have a quick walk through and you'll see why I have been quiet for some time. It's a bit dark and dingy. I broke a couple of fluoro lights. This is the rack in question, and we can see we're all empty down the left hand side. It's pretty scary how far this dropped in a hurry late in the piece. It's all due to these old tanks starting to get leaks in seams and me not maybe being quick enough on the uptake to do it. Whilst all this timber in this rack was treated pine, it was all done straight onto the ground, which in retrospect was a bad move, especially on this back wall because there's no ventilation. I'm going to make a video about, if I had my time over, design aspects that I would change about this room, and this is certainly one of them. This bit of racking here obviously is the old rack. I've still got to pull this out, but that's the problem. I cannot physically get that 8-foot tank out of this room because I can't stand it up on its end. The ceiling is not 8 foot high. The only way I could get this tank out is to take out these two 4x2x18s, and then I could potentially turn it around the corner and out the door. But I'm not doing that. I've got a method involved where we're going to drain this tank in the next couple of days. The fronties are going to just have to be squeezed in somewhere else like all the other fish. And once I've disconnected and drained this tank, got all the sand out of it, I can then lift it onto some PVC pipe to act as rollers, and we'll roll it down the hill onto the new shelf. from here on is all new racking. And I've got to thank my good mate Steve for doing a little bit of carpentry for me to do the notching and so forth. It's basically screwed together and gone up like Meccano. It's been a really easy rebuild. The two major changes I'm making to the new design is that I'm spacing it off the wall, and you can see here we've got a little stopper that means that timber will always have that 10 mil of clearance from the wall. And the other thing I'm doing differently this time is to not have timber footing. I'm building it on bricks basically. So this is simply a long timber rack with bricks on the ground 4 feet. Interestingly enough, the timber on this side of the shed is actually the oldest rack in my room, and it looks a bit white and scuffed because it's been wet a million times and needs a new lick of paint. But that timber is as solid as the day it went in, and that's probably a 2010 build on that rack. It makes you wonder, the difference between this side versus that side where it all rotted, and it's all to do with ventilation. This section in here just gets much more circulation, and so any spills that hit the deck just dry better. And this isn't even treated pine, by the way. This is just standard pine you would find in the walls of your house if you did a rebuild. So that's kind of where I'm at and why I've been quiet and dark for a while. It's a massive job that I've undertaken, and there's still a good week or so to come of me painting those tanks. We've had all sorts of rain which made the painting, even this timber, was difficult to paint, but I'm just trying to make the most of an opportunity to do a freshen up and make this a happier place to be, because ironically, right when this was all failing, I've had yet another tank down here where the seam let go. Thankfully didn't lose any fish, but just another job on the to-do list. I'm so looking forward to being a fortnight from now and having these 12 4-footers will be back in place with a lot of my breeders, which are just crammed anywhere and everywhere over here, and it's ground productivity to a halt. It's a horrible place to be, but what can you do? So there you go. I'm sorry I haven't had some more interesting content up for a while, but I'm sure you can understand that this was a significant thing I had to do, and I'll be back to making regular content very soon. I hope to get a full fish room tour done before the end of the year to match up with last year's, and hopefully that's still attainable. Thanks for watching. See you soon.